Imagine a machine so advanced it seemed to come from another decade, yet it roared to life in the mid-1980s. That machine was the Porsche 959, a supercar that redefined what was possible in 1986. Born from the ashes of Group B rallying and engineered with technology few rivals could even dream of. The 959 wasn't just fast, it was a glimpse into the future of performance. Here was a car with computer-controlled all-wheel drive, sequential twin turbos, a lightweight Kevlar body, and the ability to balance brutal speed with everyday drivability at a time when most exotics were temperamental beasts. But this wasn't a fairy tale success story. The Porsche 959 was too complex, too expensive, and in some ways too ambitious for its own era. Instead of becoming a sales triumph, it became a legend whispered about in enthusiast circles. A car so coveted that even icons like Bill Gates were caught up in the struggle to import one into the US. What makes the Porsche 959 such a fascinating case is not just its staggering performance numbers, but the way it became a technological time capsule. A car decades ahead that still feels relevant today. The stakes were high. Porsche risked millions to build a car few customers would ever own, yet the ripple effects of its innovations influenced sports cars for generations. The story of the 959 is the story of vision colliding with reality, of engineers daring to chase the horizon even when the business case made little sense. And the deeper you dig into the layers of its design, its racing roots, and its cultural impact, the clearer it becomes that the 959 wasn't just a car, it was a statement of intent. If you're ready to explore how one machine changed the course of supercar history forever, hit like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments which groundbreaking legend you want covered next. The Porsche 959 of 1986 was not conceived as a vanity project. It was forged in the crucible of Group B, a motorsport category notorious for encouraging excess and experimentation. In this landscape, Porsche's engineers saw a chance to create something beyond mere competition, an experimental platform that would push the limits of technology and showcase what the company could achieve when rules were bent toward extremes. This was not a simple sports car with added power. It was a laboratory on wheels. To truly understand the Porsche 959, we need to examine how it emerged from this volatile mix of regulation, ambition, and engineering obsession. That origin story sets the stage for one of the most audacious chapters in Porsche's history, and it begins with the rally program that never reached its full potential, yet laid the groundwork for everything that followed. Microstory, the Group B spark. In the early 1980s, Group B created a playground where manufacturers could build cars with almost no restrictions, provided they produced a handful of road-legal homologation models. Porsche, with its racing pedigree, saw a golden opportunity. Instead of fielding a traditional rally machine, the company developed the 959 prototype, originally dubbed the Group B concept, which featured a radical all-wheel drive system designed to channel power with precision across unpredictable terrain. The concept was unveiled in 1983, and its futuristic design signaled that Porsche wasn't simply aiming to compete, they wanted to dominate. But fate had other plans. Before the car could fully showcase its capabilities, Group B was banned due to fatal accidents, leaving Porsche with a half-built legend in need of a new purpose. This pivot would prove both costly and revolutionary. Context digest. What rally meant then? Rallying in the early 1980s wasn't niche. It was global theater for technology and spectacle. Manufacturers poured resources into cars that bordered on prototypes, chasing fame and proving their engineering might. Group B in particular symbolized the arms race of innovation, where lightweight composites, turbocharging, and massive horsepower became the norm. The Porsche 959's birth in this context meant it was never destined to be ordinary. It was designed to survive in chaos, which made it seem overbuilt for the road, yet perfect for testing the boundaries of performance. When the stage collapsed, Porsche had to answer an uncomfortable question. What happens when you've created the ultimate rally car and no rally exists to test it? Microstory, engineering without limits. With Group B gone, Porsche doubled down on refining the 959 into a road car. The engineers insisted on keeping the trick systems developed for rallying, like the Porsche Steuerkupplung, PSK, all-wheel drive system, which could dynamically alter torque distribution between axles. This technology was unheard of in the 1980s, giving the driver stability at high speeds and grip on unpredictable surfaces. The engine itself, derived from Porsche's 956 and 962 race cars, featured twin sequential turbos, delivering a smooth but explosive surge of power. The result was a machine capable of 0-60 in under 4 seconds and a top speed exceeding 190 mph figures that shattered expectations for a car that could also be driven comfortably on public roads. But perfection came at a price, and every step toward innovation pushed Porsche closer to a financial cliff. Reflection bridge. You can't tell the story of the Porsche 959 without recognizing the tension between triumph and risk. Micro story, the financial gamble. Building the Porsche 959 was less about profit and more about prestige. Porsche priced each car at around $225,000, an astronomical sum in 1986. Yet even that couldn't cover production costs. The development of advanced systems, new materials like Kevlar and aluminum alloys, and the small-scale nature of production meant Porsche lost money on every unit. In total, fewer than 300 road cars were built, making the 959 rare from the start. For Porsche, it was a calculated gamble, sacrifice short-term financial gain to secure long-term technological leadership. In a sense, the 959 wasn't sold to customers so much as it was released into the world as a manifesto of what the company could do. Context digest. The 959's rivals. While Porsche was losing money, rival manufacturers were building simpler, louder, less advanced machines that often sold at higher profits. These cars became bedroom posters thanks to their drama and danger, but they lacked the refinement and reliability of the 959. Where others chased raw speed with brute force, Porsche engineered a complete ecosystem of performance, blending comfort, handling, and cutting-edge safety. Yet the irony was that buyers at the time often preferred the flash and fury of less advanced cars, leaving the 959 admired but misunderstood. This contrast would define its reputation for decades, too smart for its own era, yet impossible to ignore. Microstory, the gatekeepers of import. In the United States, the Porsche 959 became even more mythical because it couldn't be imported legally at first. American safety and emissions regulations meant buyers, no matter how wealthy, couldn't simply order one. High-profile enthusiasts, including influential tech leaders, famously lobbied for changes in the law just to bring a 959 across the border. This barrier turned the car into forbidden fruit, heightening its allure. When the show or display law eventually allowed a handful to be imported years later, the 959's rarity in the US cemented its status as a holy grail. To own one was not just to own a Porsche. It was to hold a piece of outlaw history sanctioned by government exception. Reflection bridge. By now, the Porsche 959 was less a car and more a statement of power and exclusivity. Context digest, the culture around ownership. In Europe, where regulations were less prohibitive, the 959 became a symbol of ultimate discretion. Unlike louder exotics, it didn't scream for attention. Its lines were smooth, almost restrained, yet it outperformed almost everything else on the road. Owners could cruise at triple-digit speeds on the Autobahn in comfort, while rivals fought their machines at half the pace. This subtlety was part of its genius. The 959 wasn't designed to impress onlookers at first glance. It was designed to impress the driver every second behind the wheel. Yet for many collectors, the true value lay in knowing that they were experiencing technology years ahead of everyone else. Microstory, the Paris-Dakar twist. Despite the cancellation of Group B, Porsche still found ways to showcase the 959's roots. In 1986, a heavily modified 959 entered the Paris-Dakar Rally, one of the toughest endurance events in the world. Against deserts, dunes, and brutal terrain, the car not only survived but won outright, proving its resilience and versatility. This victory wasn't just a trophy. It validated the engineering behind the 959's all-wheel drive system, showing it could dominate not only smooth tarmac, but the harshest environments imaginable. For Porsche, the win was poetic justice. The rally car built for a dead series had finally found its battlefield. Microstory, technology that echoed forward. Beyond motorsport, the Porsche 959 became the seed for decades of innovation. The PSK system laid the foundation for the all-wheel drive setups later perfected in the Porsche 911 Turbo. Sequential turbocharging informed future approaches to forced induction. blending response with power. Lightweight composites foreshadowed the carbon fiber era, and even the 959's electronic monitoring systems hinted at the digital controls we now take for granted. It wasn't just a car, it was a toolkit of ideas that would filter through Porsche's lineup and influence the broader supercar landscape. Yet, at the time, few could appreciate just how far-reaching its impact would be. As the story of the Porsche 959 deepens, the next chapter reveals an even sharper contrast: how a car so groundbreaking could simultaneously become a burden, forcing Porsche to balance innovation with survival and reshaping the company's trajectory in ways few anticipated. The Porsche 959 of 1986 was already a marvel when it first hit the road, but its true story unfolded in the aftermath of its launch. Once the world caught a glimpse of what this machine could do, the conversation shifted from awe to consequence. The 959 wasn't just fast. It rewrote expectations about what a supercar could be, yet the scale of its complexity posed as many problems as it solved. Porsche had created a masterpiece that seemed untouchable, but in doing so, they raised a question that haunted the company for years. How do you follow perfection? The attempt to answer that question would ripple across engineering, culture, and even Porsche's financial stability, and that's where the tale of escalation begins. Micro story. A sales paradox. Porsche built fewer than 300 examples of the 959, and everyone was essentially a loss leader. Demand outstripped supply, but even with a sticker price of around $225,000, the cost of production exceeded revenue. For a company that wasn't yet the financial powerhouse it would later become, this was a dangerous position. The irony was stark. The 959 elevated Porsche's reputation to untouchable heights, but drained resources in the process. Customers saw exclusivity while Porsche saw red ink. This paradox would force the company to rethink how innovation and profitability could coexist. Context digest. Why innovation costs so much. Developing new materials. New drivetrains and new electronic systems in the mid-1980s meant Porsche had to pioneer everything from scratch. Suppliers couldn't simply provide off-the-shelf solutions. Porsche had to create technologies that didn't yet exist. This pushed timelines, budgets, and engineering teams to the limit. Unlike mass-market manufacturers, Porsche couldn't amortize costs across millions of units. It was pouring resources into fewer than 300 cars. The lesson was clear. The closer you get to the bleeding edge, the higher the cost of every incremental step. The 959 embodied this reality more than any other vehicle of its era. Micro story, the US struggle continues. In America, the forbidden fruit status of the 959 grew even stronger, as wealthy enthusiasts tried every loophole to bring one stateside. The federal ban wasn't lifted until the show or display exemption in 1999, long after production ended. This meant that for over a decade, Americans could only admire the car from afar, often reading about clandestine attempts to sneak examples in under the radar. This scarcity gave the 959 a mythical quality, more story than car, amplifying its legend in a market already obsessed with exclusivity. The car's presence in the US became as much about regulation as it was about engineering, a cultural tug-of-war that underscored its unique status. Reflection bridge. Sometimes, the most powerful stories are born not from what you can have, but from what you can't. Microstory, the collector's dilemma. Owning a Porsche 959 wasn't just about buying a car. It was about navigating a minefield of logistics and upkeep. Early on, servicing the 959 required flying the car back to Germany, as very few mechanics in the world were trained to handle its intricate systems. Even simple maintenance could become an ordeal, with costs spiraling beyond the means of all but the wealthiest enthusiasts. Yet this exclusivity also reinforced the car's aura. The very difficulty of owning one became part of the appeal, marking it as a status symbol beyond comparison. In an era before hypercars became common currency among billionaires, the 959 stood almost alone as an object of rarefied obsession. Context digest, the road usability edge. What made the 959 even more unusual was that, unlike many of its rivals, it was actually comfortable and usable. Where others punished drivers with stiff suspensions and finicky reliability, the 959 could cruise quietly, with air conditioning and leather appointments. You could drive it on long trips even in poor weather, thanks to its advanced all-wheel drive system. This duality, Extreme performance coupled with surprising civility was groundbreaking. It challenged the stereotype that supercars had to be wild, dangerous machines. The 959 suggested that the future of performance would combine speed with usability, a lesson that shaped nearly every supercar that followed. Microstory: the impact on Porsche's future. While the 959 drained finances in the short term, it planted seeds for long-term dominance. The PSK system became the ancestor of Porsche's modern traction control and all-wheel drive systems. Lessons from sequential turbocharging informed the next generation of turbocharged engines. The car's mix of composite and aluminum construction set the stage for Porsche's approach to lightweighting in the decades that followed. In essence, the 959 was Porsche's research and development department made tangible, a rolling prototype that doubled as a halo product. Its legacy would prove invaluable as the company refined its core models. Reflection Bridge: the 959 didn't just stand alone. It created the blueprint for what came next. Context Digest: influence beyond Porsche. The ripple effect of the 959 reached beyond Stuttgart. Rival manufacturers, unable to ignore its achievements, began investing more heavily in aerodynamics, composite materials, and digital controls. The idea that a supercar could be both blisteringly fast and everyday usable took hold across the industry. While others had focused on spectacle, the 959's quiet genius forced a reevaluation of what performance could mean. This shift influenced the birth of hypercars decades later, cars that blended technology, speed, and usability into cohesive packages. Without the 959, the modern performance landscape might look very different. Microstory: the Dakar legacy deepens. The Paris-Dakar victory of the 959 wasn't just a footnote, it remained a powerful symbol of the car's versatility. Where other rally machines faded into history, the 959 proved it could thrive on tarmac and sand alike. Porsche capitalized on this narrative, using the Dakar win as proof of the car's toughness. For owners and enthusiasts, it became a bragging right. This wasn't just a fragile exotic. It was a car tested in some of the harshest conditions on Earth. Few supercars could claim the same, and fewer still could back it up with results. Microstory: myth meets market. As the years passed, the value of the Porsche 959 skyrocketed. Collectors realized that its rarity, complexity, and backstory made it one of the most desirable cars of its era. Auction results reflected this, with prices climbing into the millions. This appreciation wasn't just financial, it was cultural validation. What had once been seen as an overly ambitious, money-losing project was now recognized as a cornerstone of automotive history. The market finally caught up to what Porsche's engineers had known all along. The 959 was not too advanced for its time. It was simply waiting for the world to catch up. The Porsche 959's evolution from misunderstood supercar to revered icon highlights the delicate balance between risk and reward. As we move deeper into its story, the final chapter reveals how its legacy shaped Porsche's future identity and cemented its place as one of the greatest machines ever built. The Porsche 959 of 1986 reached legendary status not just because of what it achieved in its own time, but because of how its influence continued to ripple outward in the years that followed. To understand its resolution, we need to examine the impact it left on Porsche, on the broader automotive world, and on the culture of performance itself. The 959 was once criticized as too advanced, too expensive, and too rare to matter, yet it ended up becoming the benchmark by which future innovation was measured. Its story closes not with failure, but with vindication. Microstory: Porsche learns the balance. In the years after the 959, Porsche recognized that not every model could afford to be as experimental. The company focused on refining its core 911 lineup, implementing key technologies pioneered in the 959, but at a scale that made business sense. The all-wheel drive system in particular became a mainstay in the 911 Turbo, allowing Porsche to blend performance with safety in ways that appealed to a broader audience. By trickling down these lessons, Porsche avoided the financial pitfalls of the 959 while still reaping its benefits. It was a strategy that proved sustainable and allowed the brand to thrive. Context Digest: setting the hypercar standard. In hindsight, the Porsche 959 was the template for the hypercar genre that emerged in the 1990s and 2000s. The idea that a car could blend usability, advanced materials, active systems, and stratospheric performance came directly from the 959 playbook. When later machines debuted with carbon fiber bodies, digital driving aids, or advanced turbos, they were following in the tire tracks Porsche had already laid down. While the 959 never sold in volume, its DNA is embedded in the concept of every hypercar that came after, making it a quiet architect of the segment. Micro-story, cultural reverence. Over time, the Porsche 959 transcended its role as a car and became a cultural artifact. It wasn't just prized by collectors. It became a symbol of vision, a car that represented the courage to build something uncompromising even when the world wasn't ready. Its presence in museums, private collections, and high-profile garages only reinforced this aura. For enthusiasts, seeing a 959 in the flesh was akin to glimpsing a rare piece of art, an experience that carried weight far beyond horsepower numbers. What was once too advanced had become timeless. Micro-story, the American redemption. The eventual legalization of the Porsche 959 in the US under show or display laws gave American enthusiasts the closure they had waited over a decade to receive. Cars that had been locked away overseas finally rolled onto American roads, cementing the car's reputation in the market that had once been denied it. This shift wasn't just regulatory, it was symbolic. It marked the moment when the Porsche 959 was no longer an outlaw dream, but a celebrated piece of history, embraced in the world's most influential car culture. For many, this was the final chapter of its myth, transformed into reality. Reflection bridge. Sometimes, history just needs time to catch up with innovation. Context. Digest. Lessons for today's industry. Modern supercar and hypercar builders still wrestle with the balance that defined the 959. They chase records and innovations, but always under the shadow of cost, regulation, and usability. In many ways, the questions first posed by the 959, how far can you push technology before it becomes impractical? How do you balance ambition with market demand? Remains central to the industry today. The 959 story offers both a warning and a roadmap, reminding engineers and executives alike that visionary cars can succeed even if the balance sheet doesn't agree at first. Microstory, the timeless takeaway. For owners and enthusiasts alike, the Porsche 959 represents the joy of driving something uncompromising. It is the rare car that was built without compromise, yet managed to endure across decades, influencing everything that came after. The 959 teaches us that being ahead of your time isn't always a weakness. It can be a gift to the future. Today, when you see one glide past, it doesn't feel like a relic. It feels like a promise that the best ideas never grow old. In closing the story of the Porsche 959, we find not just a car, but a legacy. It was too advanced for its time, yes, but that very quality is what ensured its immortality. The resolution of its story lies in how it turned skepticism into admiration, losses into influence, and obscurity into legend. The 959 stands as proof that sometimes the most important machines aren't the ones that sell the most units, but the ones that dare to lead the way forward, even when the world isn't ready. The Porsche 959 of 1986 began as an experiment born from the extremes of Group B rallying, but over the course of our journey, we've seen how it became something far more enduring. From its origins as a car without a home, to its transformation into a road-going masterpiece, and finally to its ascension as a cultural icon, the 959's path reflects the tension between ambition and reality. It was too advanced to be understood in its own time, yet its innovations laid the groundwork for nearly every performance car that followed. For US enthusiasts, the Porsche 959 carries an even more layered significance. For years, it was the car they couldn't have, a machine locked behind regulations that seemed to make it mythical. That scarcity built a mystique unmatched by rivals, turning the 959 into a symbol of desire and patience. When the show or display exemption finally opened the door for legal import, the car's arrival felt less like a market transaction and more like a redemption story. It validated the years of fascination and confirmed that this wasn't just a European marvel, it belonged to the global stage. What makes the 959 so fascinating, even now, is the balance it struck between contradictions. It was ferociously fast yet comfortable, futuristic yet restrained in design, rare yet foundational. Owners discovered that it wasn't simply a car for the garage, it was a car that could be lived with, provided you had the resources to maintain it. Collectors learned that it wasn't just an asset, but a touchstone, a piece of automotive history that connected engineering brilliance with cultural storytelling. For Porsche, the lessons of the 959 were invaluable. It showed that pushing too far ahead carries risk, but it also proved that bold experimentation can define a brand's identity for generations. The systems developed for the 959 didn't vanish. They became the DNA of the 911 Turbo and later innovations, ensuring that the investment wasn't wasted but multiplied across decades. In this way, the 959 wasn't just a car, it was a blueprint, and that is the ultimate legacy of the Porsche 959. It wasn't profitable, it wasn't accessible, and it wasn't even fully appreciated when it debuted. Yet today it stands as one of the greatest machines ever built, admired not because it fit neatly into its era, but because it dared to exist outside of it. For anyone who values performance, innovation, and the courage to chase ideas beyond the horizon, the 959 remains a reminder that the future doesn't wait for permission. Sometimes it arrives early, in the form of a car that changes everything.